What's up, Samurai? We are back again with some more Wayfinder, and today we're going to be doing a guide on all of the Wayfinder classes in the game. If you've watched my independent short videos, this is basically a collage of all of those in one. I'll put timestamps to where you can get all the characters, and just know that in order to craft all the characters, you're going to have to come to Omen here in the hub. So first, Wingrave. The first item, Wingrave's Calling, is going to cost you 10,000 gold to craft. The memory of Wingrave's Courage, which will require the vestige of his courage, which is found by slaying the blood spawn. 5 Gem of Avarice, which is randomly dropped from loot goblins inside dungeons. 25 Molten Spectra, which is found in Lost Zones when using the Solar Mutator. And 2,000 Memory Fragments, which is just all over the place in this game. Next is the memory of Prowess, which requires the vestige of Prowess, which is found by defeating the Argent Hand. Treasure Phoenix Down, which of course is gotten from the Phoenix event that you can have in dungeons sometimes. And some Glimmering Molten Spectra, which is gotten from dungeons when you have a Solar Mutator. It being glimmering means it's a higher tier, so usually you find it in mid-tier dungeons. And some more memory fragments. The memory of Wingrave's Faith, which requires the vestige of Faith, which is found by defeating the First. Archaic Bone, which is found by completing the What Lies Beneath random event in the mines. About 3/4 through the mines, you'll end up finding this drill. Then you gotta backtrack until you find a group of enemies that would have respawned. Complete the event by killing those enemies, get a bone. Then you need some Glimmering Shadow Warped Spectra, which is found by using Shadow Mutators. And some Glimmering Molten Spectra, which again is the Solar Mutator. And some memory fragments for good measure. Now Niss. So first, Niss Calling is going to end up requiring 10,000 gold to craft. Niss Will, which is going to require the vestige of Niss's Will, which is found by slaying the Broodmother. Trickster Coins, which is found from this random event that you can end up having in dungeons. Usually it's found in the Undercroft. And Shadow Warped Spectra, which is going to be a lower tier ore that you can find in Lost Zones, which is just the normal, instance dungeons of the game when you have any Shadow Mutator active. And Memory Fragments, which you all know where you get those just pretty much everywhere. Niss Shadow is next, which requires the vestige of her shadow, which is found by defeating the Archon Commander boss. Treasure Phoenix Down, which of course is found by completing the random Treasure Phoenix event. And Glimmering Shadow Warp Spectra, which is again found with a Shadow Mutator, but it's a little bit higher in the ore chart tree. Basically, you just go to more difficult dungeons and then you can find it a little more commonly. And of course, more memory fragments. Lastly, Niss Steel, which requires the vestige of Niss Steel, which is found by defeating the Knight's Maw boss. The Halcyon Orb, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, but probably not because it's a fantasy item, which is found by completing the orbital event inside the ruins. Some Glimmering Molten Spectra, which you guessed it, is by using a Solar Mutator on a dungeon. And a little more Glimmering Shadow Warp Spectra from a Shadow Mutator and some more memory fragments. And then Silo. The Silo's Calling, of course, is going to be the easiest, which is going to cost you 10,000 gold to craft. Next is the memory of Silo's Cunning, which the vestige is found by completing the Trial of Lingering Light. Some Trickster Coins, which of course is randomly gotten out of the Trickster minigame event, which sometimes won't even give you Trickster Coins. Unstable Spectra, which is found inside dungeons with the Chaos Mutator active, and some memory fragments. The next memory is Silo's Speed, and the vestige is going to be found by defeating the Argent Hand. Some Gem of Avarice, which is a random drop from loot goblins that you can find in dungeons. Glimmering Unstable Spectra, which is when you have a Chaos Mutator active, and it being a glimmering tier of ore means that you kind of have to have a higher difficulty area. And as usual, some more memory fragments, with the last key ingredient being the memory of Silo's Precision, which the vestige drops from slaying Riven the Devourer. A Halcyon Orb, which is found by completing the orbital event in the runes. Glimmering Viridian Spectra, which is found in Lost Zones or dungeons with the Flora Mutator. And some Glimmering Unstable Spectra, which is with the Chaos Mutator, and some memory fragments thrown in there for good measure. And Senja. Senja's Calling, of course, is going to be the easiest one, which requires 10,000 gold. First is going to be Senja's Might, which requires the vestige of her might, which is found by felling Kolar the Beastmaster. Trickster Coins, which is gotten out of the random Trickster event that can usually happen in the Undercroft, as well as other dungeons. And some Pristine Unstable Spectra, which is found in Lost Zones when any Chaos Mutator is active. And of course, lastly, memory fragments, which you get from pretty much everywhere. The next item, Senja's Glory, requires the Senja Glory Vistage, which is found by destroying Grand Deceiver. Gem of Avarice, which is randomly dropped from a loot goblin. Pristine Unstable Spectra, which again requires a Chaos Mutator and some more memory fragments. Lastly is going to be Senja's Storm. The Vistage of the Storm is going to be gotten from Dread Legion. Archaic Bones, which is found by completing the What Lies Beneath event randomly that can spawn inside the mines. This is going to end up being a drill that you can find about 3/4 of the way through the dungeon that you activate, and then you go backwards through the dungeon until you end up coming across this particular event. Complete it, you'll get a bone. And then we got a combination of both Pristine Molten Spectra and Unstable Spectra, which again, these are going to be from Solar Mutators and Chaos Mutators respectively, with some more memory fragments thrown in for good measure. Now Kyros. So by interacting with Omen, you can go to summon Wayfinders, and then you can see all the different crafting components, with Kyros' Calling being the first and easiest of all of the items because it requires 10,000 gold to craft. Next is going to end up being the Kyros Secrets. This requires 3 Vistage of Kyros Secrets, which is dropped by slaying the Storm Twins boss. 15 Trickster Coins, which is located at this random event that you can have inside dungeons at sometimes. 50 Pristine Shadow Warped Spectra, which is found in lost zones when any Shadow Mutator is active. And of course, 8,100 memory fragments, which are just found all over the place. Kyros' Sight is going to be the next one, which requires a Vistage of Kyros' Sight. This is found by felling Kolar the Beastmaster, which is another boss right here. 15 Treasure Phoenix Down, which is earned from the random Phoenix event that you can sometimes see inside dungeons. And more of the Shadow Warp Spectra and memory fragments. Kyros Sorcery is going to be the last one, which requires Vistage of Kyros Sorcery, which is found by slaying the Dread Legion boss. Archaic Bone, which is found by completing the What Lies Beneath event, which will spawn randomly in the mines. Basically, when you get 3/4 through the map, you're going to see this drill that you can interact with, and then you're going to have to backpedal about halfway through the map to find the conclusion of the event, which will end up giving you some bones. 30 Pristine Unstable Spectra, which is found in lost zones when any Chaos Mutator is active, and even more Pristine Shadow Warp Spectra and memory fragments. And finally, Venomess, the current Battle Pass character. First item is going to be Venomous' Calling, which requires 10,000 gold to craft. Then the Memory of Guile, which requires the Vistage of Guile, which is found by defeating the first. Some Trickster Coins, which is randomly found in the Trickster minigame event. You don't always get the coins, unfortunately. Some Glimmering Viridian Spectra, which is found inside dungeons when you have the Flora Mutator active, and a crap ton of memory fragments. Next is going to be the Memory of Venomous' Venom, which the Vistage is found by slaying the Grand Deceiver Maras, a bunch of Gems of Avarice, which is randomly dropped from loot goblins you can find inside dungeons. Pristine Viridian Spectra, which is again going to be with a Floral Mutator, but you have to be in a higher tier dungeon. And some more memory fragments. And the last core component, which is the Memory of Venomous' Duty. So the Vistage is found by challenging the Storm Twins boss. Some Archaic Bone, which is found by completing the What Lies Beneath event in the mines. So if you get about 3/4 of the way through this dungeon, you can end up finding this drill, activating it, going backwards to kill the enemies that just spawned for the event, kill them, you complete the event, you get some bones. Then you need some Pristine Shadow Warped Spectra, which again is going to be from higher tier dungeons with a Shadow Mutator active. And then even more Pristine Viridian Spectra, which is going to be found in dungeons with a Flora Mutator at much higher tiers. With the last item being some more memory fragments. The next tutorials I'm working on are going to end up being crafting guides for all the different weapons in the game. Of course, I'll have quicker, shorter versions of those tutorials, and then I could collage all of them together similarly to what I did with this video. I want you to also keep in mind that at the time that I'm recording this video, the new character Grendel isn't in the game yet, but he should be arriving soon, and eventually I'll have his video in the links in the description.